Hello, 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 hello. Hi, streaming. Did you see this thing about Craig Kelly on the TV? Pretty bad. Pretty bad. Pretty bad. Pretty bad.
You need to listen to the Aborigines.
Need to listen to the Aborigines? I'm going to put this thing on. I'm going to put this video on because I can.
Craig Kelly, who's a politician in Australia who works for Scott Morrison's government. Mr. Kelly, thank you, first of all, for joining us. You're a climate change sceptic. You believe this has nothing to do with climate change. Explain that.
Well, Piers, you have to look at the science and what our scientists are telling us. And the three factors that cause the bushfires is firstly the fuel loads. Now, we have record fuel loads on the ground here. That's the bush that accumulates over the years. And every single Royal Commission we've had from our past bushfires have to reduce those fuel loads. And that is the main issue. And yet we have failed to do so. Just one example, the Royal Commission in 2009 called for a minimum burning of 5% of the state's forest in Victoria. That would amount over the last 2 years to something like 770,000 hectares that should have been backburnt. And the actual number was something only like 200,000.
OK, but you appeared, Mr. Kelly. You
appeared,
Mr. Kelly, at an event. You appeared at an event. If I may just interrupt you, we're running out of time. You appeared at an event, an APPEA event, a few months ago, which you said words to the effect it was reported of to the audience. Yes. Make sure you burn as much oil and gas as you can over the summer, put your roast in a gas-fired oven, fill up your gas bottles and fly from one end of the country to the other. Why would you say such a thing? Well,
Piers, that has nothing to do with the fires. There's a great myth out there.
Given that most scientists in the world, Mr. Kelly, given that most scientists in the world agree that the planet is heating at a dangerous level, and that a lot of the contributory factors of that is from man-made use of fossil fuels and our carbon footprint, why would you, as a senior politician in Australia, encourage people to do the complete opposite to what every scientist is advising us to do?
Well, Piers, because fossil fuels, Piers, are one of the things that our lifestyle depends upon. And if we try and do without fossil fuels here, especially in Australia, and especially over Christmas, it is something that can't be done. And to try and make out, as some politicians have, is to hijack this debate and exploit this tragedy to push their ideological barrow that somehow or other the Australian government could have done something by reducing its carbon emissions that would have reduced these bushfires is just complete nonsense.
Do you accept the planet is heating up at a dangerous level? Yes or no?
Yes.
And you accept that the average temperature in Australia is increased?
Since the 1970s, there's been a warming.
But you think there is no link?
Yes, but if you look at the maximum temperatures during the day when the fires, if you look at our long-term, well, what causes the main thing of the fires is the build-up of the fuel on the ground and the drought. And if you look at our science, if you look at the long-term rainfall records in Australia, there is simply no trend. As CO2 has increased, there has been no trend.
We want to bring in Lazer Zap in here.
Our weather expert.
Our meteorologist. All right, Mr. Kelly, our weather expert, Lazer Zap, wants to respond to you. Laura.
So Australia have just had, in 2019, their highest year temperature-wise ever recorded and their driest year ever recorded, with forecasts and temperatures that go back over 100 years. At the moment, we want everyone to commit in the world to be 1.5 degrees to lower our global temperature rise. You can't even commit to 2 degrees. You have the second highest carbon emission per person on Earth, and you are burying your head in the sand. This is a climate emergency. You're not a climate sceptic, you're a climate denier.
Hang on a minute. Hang on. There's a few issues there. Firstly, the first 20 years of this century, we have had more rainfall in Australia than the first 20 years of the last century. So if you look at the year 2000,
there's more extreme weather. You're right. There is more extreme weather
in Australia, even though this has been the lowest year compared to the first 20 years of the last century, from 1900 to 1919. Now, when it comes to Australia's performance on carbon emissions, we have had in Australia over the last 2 years the highest uptake of anywhere in the world of renewable energy,
No,
solar and wind power. In fact, we've had three times more than Germany.
India did.
Yes, we have. These are the facts. Since 2018 to 2000, I'm talking per capita, we have had the highest uptake of renewable energy anywhere in the world. We've been 3 times more than Germany and 5 times more than the EU.
Mr. Kelly, let me ask you this.
Renewable energy
Mr. Kelly, let me ask
per
you.
capita in Australia.
Let me ask you this.
That's the numbers. They are
Your
the facts.
Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, his response to these fires erupting all over Australia was to go on holiday to Hawaii. Why did he do that?
Well, firstly, one thing you have to understand about our fire regime and our firefighting regime, it is state-based. It is the state premiers. We have separate state firefighting forces, like we have separate state police forces. So the ultimate responsibility for fighting fires is the state premiers,
but it's a
and then the
national
state
emergency, isn't it, Mr. Kelly? So you would expect the national leader to take charge and not fly out of the country.
Well, the only thing the national leader can actually do on this is basically until he gets response from those state premiers asking for more resources.
Or he can
and
show
every
leadership.
time any one of those state premiers has come forward and said we need something, the Prime Minister has done that.
The truth is he was absent when the fires were burning.
Today he's made an announcement of another $2 billion.
Scott Morrison thought the right response to these fires erupting in Australia was to go and lie on a beach in Hawaii. And that was a dereliction of his duty as leader of Australia. You're facing now one of the greatest crises you've ever faced. And there is you, Mr. Kelly, with respect, a senior politician who still doesn't think this has anything to do with a heating up planet. Nothing to see here, nothing to worry about, as virtually your entire country is eviscerated by fires. It is quite extraordinary.
This is a terrible disaster. This is one of our nation's worst natural disasters. And the question we have to do in the past, when we had these in our nation, we all sat back and we got to fix it up, rather than people get out there to score political points.
Mr. Kelly, we have to leave it there. We appreciate you joining us.
That is what is happening now.
We appreciate you joining us. We've got to leave it there. I've got to say, wake up.
Thank you.
Wake up. Climate change and global warming are real. And Australia right now is showing the entire world just how devastating it is. And for senior politicians in Australia to still pretend there's no connection is absolutely disgraceful.
As Laura Tobin might say, get your head out the sand.
Get your head out.